Buddy Holly was a major influence on Waylon Jennings. In fact, it was Buddy that talked to Waylon. He said, don't ever compromise your music. Do it your way. If you do get a recording contract, don't let some producer mess with you. Don't let them ruin you. Stick to your values, do it your way. Waylon has always done that. He's always done that. In fact, when he was starting out, he was told, you're not really country, and you're not gonna, you won't do very well. You most definitely won't be in the Hall of Fame. Well, we know that he did make the Hall of Fame, although he pretty much told him to stick it and he didn't show up. I think it was his son that showed up and accepted the plaque. But he is in the Hall of Fame. He is. The Winter Dance Party, January 1959. I want to talk about that a little bit. It was scheduled for the month of January and part of February. So, I'll throw this in. I was born 8 days later after that plane crash, too. So the story is, I want to clean that up a little bit. Waylon did not flip a coin with anybody, not JP Richardson or anybody. The story is that the Big Bopper had the flu, so Waylon volunteered to give up his seat for the Bopper so that he can get into Moorhead, Minnesota, and get some rest. Plus they wanted to do some laundry and some other stuff too. So right after the show, it's Waylon and Buddy visiting in that side room just off the stage. By the way, it was Tommy Alsop and Richie Valens that flipped a coin. Okay. So when Buddy sees Waylon, he says, "So you're not going to fly with us, huh?" And Waylon said, "Nah, I'm gonna give up my seat." And Buddy said, "Well, I sure hope your old bus freezes up." And Waylon hit back immediately with, "Well, I hope your plane crashes." Now, this bothered Waylon for years and years and years. He finally got some counseling, some therapy. Now, here's how he got over it. The counselor said, well, if you had anything to do with that plane crash, if you had the power to do that, then that would also mean you have the power to bring them back. So go right ahead, but bring them all back. So Waylon ends up, although he still felt guilty his entire life, he was able to deal with it and continue. So 1960, a year after plane crash, Waylon Jennings moves here to Arizona, and he's performing at a nightclub called JD's, doing very well there. Financially, he's doing pretty good, pretty well. So Bobby Bear hears Waylon performing, and he immediately calls Mr. Guitar, Chet Atkins, and says, "Hey, I got a guy here in Phoenix you just got to sign." So Waylon ends up signing a contract. Once Willie Nelson heard what kind of money Waylon's making at JD's, he says, "Hey man, just stay where you're at, just stay put." But 5 years later, 1965, Waylon ends up moving to Nashville. He moves in, he roommates with Johnny Cash, and they're both on the pills, and they're hiding the pills from each other. Waylon did very well in his career, had many #1 hits. His biggest hit was just the Good Ole Boys, and he narrated the Dukes of Hazzard TV show. And that was 1976. No, it was a little bit later, because his best album, Wanted, The Outlaws, was 1976. That became a #1 smash country album. In fact, it was a $1 million seller. It was the first country album that sold 1 million copies. It was also a crossover hit. It did well. as a crossover hit too, #1 album. After that, Waylon's career, things began to slip. He wasn't selling as many albums, struggling a little bit financially. Plus, he had a $1,500 a day cocaine habit, and that put him in debt, $2.5 million. Waylon picks up hepatitis. He's in the hospital. So he asked RCA for a $25,000 advance. They came back and offered him $5,000, and he looked at it in the new contract, and well, you know Waylon, he told him to stick it. So after this, about this time, he gets a visit from a guy named Neil Reshen. It's Reshen. So Neil becomes his manager, and a little bit later, he became Willie Nelson's manager too. So Neil is able to get him a nice contract with a $75,000 advance, 5% of the royalties too, and he also got him full control, full artistic control of everything. So he also advised Waylon to keep the beard, because Waylon grew a beard while he's in the hospital. Keep that, that's going to look good for outlaw movement. So he did that. Waylon never filed bankruptcy because he said, I got myself into this mess, I'll get myself out. Now, a courier, here we are now, Waylon Jennings. Died February 13th, 2002. Got some guitar strings. I was starting to say a courier delivered a big envelope of a packet to the recording studio, and it had cocaine in it. So this courier snitches to the authorities about Waylon. So they show up at the recording studio, but what they didn't know is that the mics are open. So Waylon is back in the studio and he can hear the conversations. So he takes that envelope and gives it a whirl across the room and slides right underneath the baseboard. Gone, disappeared. So the authorities couldn't find anything, they leave. However, they came back at another time and arrested Waylon Jennings for possession of cocaine with the intent to sell. Later, the charges were dropped after all that. Once Waylon left Nashville, he moved back here to Chandler. Chandler's right out this way, it's out north. And he ends up dying here. He picked up type 2 diabetes. So he died in his home, and again, that was 2002. I want to say this, one nice thing about living in Las Vegas, I've lived there for 40 years. One nice thing about living there is many of these stars come through town. They come to Las Vegas and perform. So I've actually seen Waylon Jennings perform about 6 times, and it's quite a show, quite a show. Waylon Jennings, one of the good ones. He's from Littlefield, Texas, and I've driven by there as I was heading to Lubbock to film Buddy Holly. And Littlefield really is, it's named properly because it's just a little tiny thing just off the road. They do have Waylon Jennings Street, and then there's an old barn out there, and it's got his picture painted on it too. That's about it at Littlefield. That's just about it.